Hey, so welcome to video 14. We're going to talk about how I unwrap stuff in Modo. I've been asked a couple times because I tend to not have a problem with UV mapping. Like some people do, they find it very tedious and it takes a long time, but honestly, with the 2 or 3 macros I have set up and one really useful script that I'll show you at the end, I don't mind UV unwraps. In fact, that's like the fastest part of my job making a prop. So we'll run through that. We'll talk a little bit how to record your own macros in Modo. And at the end, we'll look at another plugin, one I love to use called Snap. We'll see you then. So here we are inside of Modo. And before we get going on my specific unwrap techniques and this sort of thing, I wanted to talk really briefly about how Modo handles macros. The super high level description is that basically Modo is running a command interpreter in the background or below it or whatever the terminology is. And everything you do in Modo, all the buttons, the menu items, the hotkeys, they're all firing text commands to this processor. So it's kind of like MacScript in Mel. It's the same sort of thing, right? So all that a macro is a collection of those commands that Modo just reads in your macro file and fires off the lines one after the other till it's till it reaches the end of the file. So with that in mind, all you got to do is if you hit the F5 key, you can bring up the command history window. And looking in here, you can see all the commands that I've been doing, right? So if I start to navigate around here and select some polygons, do a loop select and do like a ring select and that kind of stuff, you can see those commands are all piling up in here. And this text right here, this select.loop, select.ring, that kind of thing, those are the commands that go into your macro. Now, to record a macro in Modo is super simple. You just go up to the system menu and tell it you want to record macro. We'll just do it. Why not, right? So you go in here, you say, well, yeah, that loop select is what I want to have inside my macro. Once you're done, you turn off the recording, and then you can hit that again and hit save to file. And that will save out a text file that you can then bind to a key or bind to a form button or whatever. So with that very high level stuff in mind, let's talk about how I unwrap stuff. So for example purposes, I thought we would focus on this thing here. This is a low poly version of a widget that I have that lives in my kitbash library. So the way that I typically will unwrap things, and I do a lot of hard surface. Organic stuff tends to be a little more freeform, but in terms of hard surface things, I typically do a planar map with a couple of relax iterations, or I do a cylindrical unwrap with a couple of relax iterations. There's exceptions that require some other techniques that we can talk about in the future, but those are the bread and butter of how things get unwrapped, at least in my world. So if we go in here, let me kill the smoothing off this too, just to make it nice and defaulted. Okay, so if I were to unwrap this, I tend to take everything that's flat and fire it off through the simple macro that I have set up. So if I grab this, I would typically grab these as well, just because the way I look at it, if something has a shallow angle like this, that's not a smoothing break, and it's not going to affect the normal map at all. And you might as well reduce verts where you can, because I tend to add them places that other people don't. So I think it all comes out in the wash. So with those selected, I fire off my macro, which would give me this nice flat unwrap of that. Now it's not aligned on the UV map, so I have a macro or a script that I got from somewhere on the Modo forums that I bound to Shift E that just allows me to pick an edge, and align to that edge. So I'll hide that piece. Now that it's unwrapped, when things get unwrapped, then I tend to hide them as I go along, just for simplicity. Now this piece here, you might be tempted to to just planar map that. But I actually will tear off these as separate unwraps. And I can hear this screaming in the back of the room already, but just hang on. The reason I do that is you've got this this concave corner right here. See the smoothing comes around, it's like convex, 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 boom, then it's concave. Concave breaks, I find, are the best places to put UV seams because, well, it just tends to be that way in my experience. So I'll grab those 4 polygons and fire off my macro again. It takes a second when there's multiple islands selected. Now don't worry about the size of these right now. That doesn't matter. That'll happen later during the packing. So hide that. Now we just have these nice little half curves left. So we'll select those and unwrap those in the same way, just hitting the F4 key. Those look fine. Hide those. Grab this, select that surface. Now in this case here, you could make the same argument that, yeah, there's a convex edge here or curve here. And I could just take that whole thing and probably do a planar map and it would work. Well, let's just see what it looks like. So if I do that and fire it off, and the trouble is you get some weird warping, and I can go into relax and try a conformed relax, and yeah, Modo does some stupid stuff like this. Like it's got the interior faces on the outside. It's just, yeah, I don't mess with that. So anyway, let me just grab that top face and fire off my macro, right, which gives me a nice flat projection for that top face. Hide that. Now this represents this outside ring, and this is obviously a cylindrical unwrap. So for cylindrical unwraps, I have a couple of macros set up again. And I got a custom pop-up here that offers me 2 ways of doing the cylinder unwrap. And it's just because of the way I could probably do this with 1 macro, but I haven't figured it out yet. So I will try the 1 axis. Okay, that looks good. Now this is where my other macro comes in. It's essentially the same as the first one, but in this case, we don't do the planar unwrap first because it's already done. It just does the relaxing and aligning. So if I fire off that relax, I end up with this. Now we're going to see in just a minute how to straighten that island out. But for now, I'm going to leave it the way it is and unhide everything. And then I'll pack it. And there's the unwrap for that object. Now, yeah, you could get a lot more conservative with verts, by, like we talked about, welding these faces back to these islands up here and that kind of stuff. But in the end, I find that it's easier, or I find that I'd rather spend the vertices here and there to facilitate the normal map bake and to make texturing easier, because with better projections, like flat, full projections with no real distortion, those just look better in the end. It's a higher quality product. Oh, and something I forgot to mention, just a real quick note about smoothing. Once I get done with my unwrap, using my methodology of the concave splits and all that, setting up my smoothing on my vertices is really super simple. So what I do is I use the Vertex Normal toolkit. And fun side note, that's now built into Modo 10, which I'll be upgrading to very soon. So all future videos will be Modo 10 from now on. So look forward to that. But for now, we use the external script. And what I do is I just set the whole mesh to a smoothing angle of 179, right, which puts it all into one smoothing group. And then using this button up here, that will harden all the edges that lie on the borders of the UV islands. So hitting that makes the smoothing that. And that is the ideal smoothing for normal map baking, because splitting on the edges of the UV islands just helps with the projections. It makes all the projections behave in the way that you would want them to behave. I'm explaining that badly, and we'll get into that in a future video when we talk about normal map baking and get into unwrapping more deeply. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't leave smoothing out of the equation. So to wrap this up, let's take a look at the innards of one of those macros. Let's look at my relax macro, right? The one that happens when I hit the F8 key it does a couple different cycles of unwrapping. And if I look at my command history, you can see now all we get here is, oh, you fired off a macro called light map relax. Now, now I originally wrote these macros with light maps in mind, but they work great for regular unwrapping as well. So that's why it's called that. But if I flip over there to the light map relax macro, that's what Modo recorded when I did the macro originally. So this looks like a wall of text, and I understand that, but it's not that hard to follow once you know what Modo's doing. And really, you don't have to be able to parse this, right? This is what Modo recorded for me. So it does an LSCM relax, and then it does an adaptive relax, and then it turns off all my selections, and then it runs the UV orient command, which tries to align it to an axis automatically for me, and that's it. Saves me time. Sorry. And the original macro, the one that does the planar map first, is this exact same macro, except I call a second macro called auto planar map that I have sitting on my hard drive. And that's really the bulk of it. Those two macros make up most of my UV unwraps. And they're really simple to create, and you can see how much time they save. I just select faces, bang, select faces, bang. Repeat till the mesh is done. And that's why I don't mind UV unwrapping. So to wrap this up, I'm going to show you a little script that I use all the time called uvrecter. I found this script online a couple years ago, and it's on some sort of Asian website. So I don't know what the text on the website says. I just see the GIFs of the features, and I'll link it down here in the description. But all you need to know is that uvrecter works. What it does is it takes a UV island that's made up of all quads, and it's a strip. So just like you get from a cylindrical unwrap, or maybe you've selected a seam on a hose, and you've used the auto unwrap or something, and your UVs are everywhere. This will straighten them out to a nice rectangle. And I think this is built in to Modo 901, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, this is what I do. So let's say I have this island here. You remember that we unwrapped this with a cylindrical unwrap. So to use uvrecter, you have to fire it off twice, which took me a while to figure out. But what you do, I go in here and I select this loop here in the middle. And then I fire it off my custom menu, fire uvrecter. It does that, which looks bad. So we selected the longest running loop. Now we select a loop that goes parallel to that one. Let's say this, and fire off the script again. And there we have a lovely rectangular unwrap. If we bring back the other faces and repack the UVs, you can see how much better that sits in there. Now obviously that's got a little more distortion in it than just leaving that natural curve and stuff, but this shape works so much better for packing, and so much better. You can do cool stuff too, like let's say you have a strip of quads that runs across your mesh. Being able to take that weird strip and lay it out flat very easily allows you to tile something along it. A pattern or text or whatever, and then that will wrap nicely around your model. So yeah, I think it's a very valuable thing to have in the toolbox. And I'll include the link down below. Good luck. So the snap plugin. This is very straightforward, to be honest, but I'm one of those who believes that you can never have enough redundancy when it comes to file versioning and safety. Like when I'm working on stuff, I'm working on the file being saved in my Dropbox folder, so it's always being uploaded, to the cloud, and it's being versioned there. Plus, with the Snap plugin, I have extra, backup. Well, and I have autosaves turned on too. I'm very paranoid. So basically, when you install the Snap plugin, you get an extra menu added to your menu bar up here called Snap, fittingly. So you pull that down. There's two kinds of saves with the Snap plugin. The Quick Snap, basically what it does is it makes a folder within that same folder where the mesh lives called, whatever your mesh name is, snaps. And quick snaps will save a version in there first. There's like 10 versions or something that it cycles through round robin style. So it saves it in there first, and then it saves to the original location. So what I've done is I've bound my Control S hotkey, which would normally just be file save. My Control S goes to quick snap. So every time I hit that save key, I'm throwing a revision into my snap folder. And then the second type is the log snap. Log snap will ask you for a description of the save and put it into a special file name within that snaps folder that doesn't get written over when the round robin runs out. So that's for like major milestones, like I'm going to start tearing down the low poly now, or I'm going to experiment with a different shape here and I want to preserve this version absolutely, that kind of thing. And it's got the ability to restore the snap of your choice and all that, but that's really about it. It's just a helpful little save utility, but man, it's nice having that added peace of mind of knowing that I not only have the Dropbox, I not only have the quick saves, but I also have Snap protecting my work as well. So that's it. Check it out.